So you've played Space Marine 2. You fell in love with the grimdark universe of the 41st millennium, and your appetites have been whetted and you're looking for something more to chew on. And now you're asking, well, where do I go next? What's out there waiting for me? How do I experience the 40k universe and all of its glory? Now, there are a ton of games in the 40k universe that caters to pretty much everyone with all the genres and types of games. But for today, I want to focus in on one specific title, that being Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. Now, what this game is a CRPG. And if you've played games like, Baldur's Gate 3, then you basically know what to expect. There is a heavy emphasis on role-playing, on narrative, and the combat is nothing to scoff at either. Narratively, you take on the role of the eponymous Rogue Trader, a member of the imperial nobility bearing the sacred warrant of trade, which basically lets them have free reign. Their power limited only by the Emperor, certain members of the Inquisition, and your fellow rogue traders as well. Now this gives the rogue trader certain privileges that the average citizen of the Imperium does not have, like dealing with aliens or conquering new star systems, bringing them into the fold of the Empire under your own rule. And when a certain crisis befalls your house, as well as the sector of the galaxy in which you rule, it is up to you to resolve this crisis, defeat the enemies of humanity, and unravel this sector-spanning conspiracy, all while managing your own protectorate, which are the planets that you govern, while also building your relationship with the various factions in the sector, as well as with your own companions. The usual CRPG stuff. And I would say the game succeeds in capturing this grand sense of scale. You'll find yourself traveling from system to system, exploring uncharted territories, and bringing them into the Imperial fold, killing Xenos, killing Chaos Demons, all sorts of that good stuff that you'd expect from the 40k universe. And overall, I think the narrative is quite effective. It succeeds in what it sets out to do. And honestly, the decision to focus in on rogue traders is a smart decision, I think, because you get to explore certain aspects of the 40k universe that are generally inaccessible to the common person. Combat-wise, if you're used to playing Space Marine, this is pretty much as different as you can get. Okay, it's a turn-based tactical RPG reminiscent of XCOM, where you control your party of 6, including your rogue trader, in which you really got to pay attention to the characters you bring, how they synergize with each other, what talents you pick to level up and character creation, and so on and so forth. This is an RPG first and foremost, and if you played games like the tabletop Rogue Trader, you'll find that there are quite a few differences here in how the combat works, because Owlcat, the developers of this game, have made quite a few changes that honestly makes it quite unrecognizable from its tabletop roots. Generally though, I had a blast playing the combat. The main mechanic of the game is to build momentum, and you get momentum by defeating enemies or by using certain abilities, and when your momentum reaches a certain threshold, you get to activate something called the heroic ability. Now each class have different heroic abilities, and they're basically what turns your characters into a powerhouse. So basically, the better you do, the stronger you get. And consequentially, the game turns into a sort of race, where you have to figure out how to get that heroic ability first, before your enemies destroy you. And let me tell you, there is nothing more satisfying than popping that heroic ability and just spraying down the battlefield with your heavy bolter, destroying everything in your path, while your enemies have not had a single chance to move. And like Space Marine, you can do all of this with your friends. There is a built-in co-op mode where you can explore the galaxy together, although its implementation is not perfect. It's a bit janky, like honestly every other game that Owlcat has made. But we'll discuss that in a little bit. Overall though, it's still a lot of fun to destroy the enemies of humanity with your pals. Now for some caveats. The game launched in a pretty terrible state and very janky, And now, over a year or so later, it's still a bit janky, especially if you play co-op, but it's also now a lot more playable. Owlcat games are kind of infamous for being very buggy at launch, but personally, playing in 2024, I've had no problems during my own playthrough, thankfully. But keep that in mind, it's not as polished of an experience as, say, Baldur's Gate or Space Marine even. It was made by a pretty small studio after all, so if you're expecting a more clean AAA experience, you'd better look elsewhere. And it also doesn't have the best replayability, at least on a narrative standpoint. There is some choice and consequence. Your companions can change their attitudes depending on how you treat them. There are different changes to the ending depending on what you choose. But overall, I found the changes to be very minor. And honestly, if you play like a somewhat completionist first playthrough, there is not that much to see on a second one. There is some replayability in the combat. You could experiment with different builds and compositions. But it is a far cry from Owlcat's previous games, particularly the games in the Pathfinder system, where you had literal decades of material to take from. I think there's like dozens of classes and subclasses. It's definitely felt. And in conclusion, do I think it's worth it? Honestly, for this price, I think I got it on sale for $30 or so. And for the amount of content that I had, I think my first playthrough was over 100 hours of incredible fun. I would say yes. If you're a fan of RPGs or you're a fan of 40k, you want to experience this universe, there is no game as comprehensive, as grand, and as satisfying as Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, for sure. But yeah. That's all I got. That's all I got.